My husband said he was getting a home loan for my heart surgery, but he never returned. The hospital canceled my care when his insurance was pulled. Then a man in a suit settled every bill. He kissed my hand and whispered 6 words that changed my life. The sterile cold of the cardiac ICU pressed into my skin like a second layer of frost, sharper than the November wind I'd walked through 6 weeks ago when all this started. A woman in pale blue scrubs stood at the foot of my bed, clipboard clutched against her chest like a shield, her eyes refusing to meet mine. I could smell the antiseptic, the faint copper of my own blood still drying on the 4th line, and something else underneath it, all the smell of a decision that had already been made without me. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, her voice soft the way people speak at funerals. "Your insurance claim has been denied. The primary policyholder canceled coverage 48 hours ago. Unless we receive payment or a valid replacement policy by end of day tomorrow, the hospital will have to transfer you to county care for the remainder of your recovery." I stared at her. The machines around me beeped in their small mechanical rhythm, counting the seconds of a life I no longer understood. 6 weeks ago, I had been a 31-year-old elementary school art teacher in Portland, Oregon, married 4 years to a man I thought I knew. Now I was lying in a hospital bed with a fresh surgical scar running down the center of my chest, my heart stitched back together after what the doctors had called a sudden cardiac event of unclear origin. And my husband, the policyholder she was talking about, had disappeared the night before my surgery, saying he was going to the bank to arrange equity loan to cover anything insurance wouldn't. He never came back. "There has to be a mistake," I whispered. "My husband, Daniel, he wouldn't. He's my emergency contact." He signed the consent forms. The nurse's jaw tightened. She lowered the clipboard. "Mrs. Calloway, I'm sorry. I've been a nurse for 22 years, and I don't like being the one who has to say things like this. But the billing office has called the contact number on file 11 times in the past 2 days. Each call goes to voicemail. A woman answered once," she said. "She said you were no longer Mr. Calloway's concern." A woman. The words landed somewhere beneath my ribs, in the exact place the surgeon had just finished repairing. I closed my eyes. Behind my lids, I saw the last 6 months in fast forward. Daniel working late. Daniel's phone flipped face down at dinner. Daniel telling me the chest pains I'd been having were probably anxiety, that I was working too hard, that I should stop drinking so much coffee. Daniel handing me a warm mug of lemon ginger tea every night before bed, pressing a kiss to my forehead, telling me he just wanted his wife to feel better. Telling me. I opened my eyes. What did the doctor say caused this? The cardiac event. Did they find out yet? The nurse hesitated. Dr. Reyes wanted to speak to you himself. The toxicology panel from your admission came back this morning. He'll be in shortly. She paused, as if debating whether to say more, then shook her head. Please rest, Mrs. Calloway. Try not to strain yourself. She turned and left, and for a long time the only sound in the room was the quiet accusation of my own heart, beating in a rhythm it had not chosen. I should tell you, before this goes any further, that my name is Claire. Claire Ellen Calloway, formerly Claire Ellen Whitfield. And if you had asked me 6 weeks ago who I was, I would have told you I was nobody special. Orphan raised in the foster system outside Eugene. Community college scholarship. Art education degree from Portland State. Married Daniel Calloway at 27. The man who walked into the coffee shop where I worked weekends and told me my smile looked like the first sunny day after a Portland winter. No living family. No inheritance. No history worth mentioning. That was the lie I had been told my entire life. The man in the dark gray suit arrived at 3:47 that afternoon. I remember the time because I had been watching the clock on the wall and trying not to cry. Trying to figure out whether I still had enough credit on my personal card to cover even one more night of care. Trying to imagine my life as a woman with a mended heart and nowhere to go. He knocked twice on the open door frame, a courtesy I hadn't expected. He was tall, perhaps 60, with silver hair combed neatly back and the kind of stillness in his face that belongs to people who have spent their lives not flinching. Behind him stood a younger woman in a charcoal blazer, holding a leather portfolio against her chest. Mrs. Calloway, he said, and his voice caught on the name in a way I didn't understand yet. Forgive the intrusion. My name is Henry Prescott. I'm an attorney from Boston. I have been looking for you for 29 years. I would have laughed if I'd had the strength. I think you have the wrong room. I don't. He crossed the tile floor with measured steps, stopped a respectful distance from the bed, and then he did something that made the air leave my body. He reached out very slowly and took my hand, the one without the fourth, and pressed it to his forehead, and I saw a tear fall from his eye onto the white sheet. You look exactly like her, he whispered, exactly like your mother. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to breathe. Mrs. Calloway, Claire, I understand you've just had major surgery, and this is the worst possible moment. But the hospital administrator informed my office 40 minutes ago that you were about to be transferred out of cardiac care. I have already settled your bill in full, every dollar, past, present, and projected. You are not going anywhere. I don't understand. He released my hand gently. The younger woman stepped forward and opened the portfolio. Inside was a photograph in a clear plastic sleeve. A woman with dark auburn hair and wide gray eyes, laughing into a camera, a small child in her lap. The child had my face. Your birth name is Claire Elizabeth Whitfield Ashford, Mr. Prescott said. Your mother was Margaret Ashford, the only daughter of Edmund Ashford III. You were taken from a car accident site outside Manchester, New Hampshire, in the winter of 1997, when you were 2 years old. The state of New Hampshire recorded you as a fatality because your car seat was found 20 feet from the wreckage, empty and covered in blood. We know now that a passing motorist took you to a hospital 3 counties away under a different name. You entered the foster system as Jane Doe. You became Claire Whitfield because that was the name on the bracelet the emergency room gave you the night you were admitted. The room had started to spin slowly. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Your mother died at the scene. Your father, my closest friend, spent every remaining year of his life searching for you. He died last spring still believing you were alive. His will left his estate, the Ashford Family Trust, to be held until you were found or until legal presumption of death was established. We found you, Claire. A DNA match from a discarded coffee cup outside your apartment confirmed it 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, I whispered. Yes. That's when I started feeling sick. Mr. Prescott's face changed then. A shadow passed behind his eyes, the kind of shadow that 60-year-old Boston attorneys have learned to hide very well, and I knew in that moment that he already suspected what Dr. Reyes was about to walk in and tell me. Claire, he said carefully, the trust your grandfather established is worth approximately $412 million. You are its sole heir. $412 million. I thought about the lemon ginger tea every night for 6 months, and somewhere in a part of my brain that was still very much my mother's daughter, something cold and clear and sharp as a surgical blade clicked into place. Dr. Reyes came in an hour later. He was a small man with kind eyes, and he closed the door behind him before he sat down on the edge of the chair beside my bed. Mr. Prescott stood by the window. His assistant waited outside. Claire, Dr. Reyes said, the toxicology report showed elevated levels of a compound called oleandrin in your bloodstream. It comes from the oleander plant. In small repeated doses, it causes fatigue, nausea, irregular heartbeat. In larger doses over time, it damages the heart muscle itself. Given the pattern of damage we saw during surgery, my best medical estimate is that you've been ingesting it for 4 to 6 months. Is it in food? It dissolves easily in warm liquid. Tea, soup, broth. It has a slightly bitter taste that's easy to mask with honey or citrus. I nodded. The ceiling of the hospital room had a water stain in the shape of a rabbit. I had been looking at it for a week. I kept looking at it now. Doctor, I said, I'd like the police to come today, please, before I discharge. He glanced at Mr. Prescott. Mr. Prescott nodded once. They're already on their way, Mrs. Calloway, Dr. Reyes said gently. Hospitals are required to report suspected poisonings. The detective will be here within the hour. I turned my face to the window. Outside the Portland rain was starting, soft and gray, the way it had rained on our wedding day 4 years ago when my husband had kissed me under a borrowed umbrella and told me I was the only family he would ever need. Recovery took 12 weeks, not 2. Let me be clear about that, because I want to be honest with you. A chest that has been cracked open and sewn shut does not simply mend on a dramatic timeline. I spent the first 3 weeks learning to breathe without wincing. I spent the next 4 learning to walk the length of a hospital corridor without my hands shaking. Cardiac rehab was 8 weeks after that, 3 mornings a week, with a physical therapist named Denise who did not care that I was suddenly one of the wealthiest women in New England. She cared that I did my squats correctly, and that I drank enough water. Mr. Prescott, Henry, he asked me to call him, moved me to a private rehabilitation facility in the hills above Lake Oswego as soon as I was stable enough to be transferred. Not because I asked him to, because he knew my husband did not know I was still alive. You see, when Daniel vanished the night before my surgery, he did not simply abandon me. He went home, forwarded the hospital's contact number to a burner phone, told the billing office that his wife was no longer his responsibility, canceled his insurance, emptied our joint savings account of $84,000, and left Portland with a woman named Vanessa Bryce. Vanessa was 34, worked in commercial real estate, and had been sleeping with my husband for 19 months. I know this because Henry's firm, at my request, hired a private investigator the morning after our first conversation. Daniel thought I was dead, or as good as dead. He had canceled my insurance specifically so that when the hospital transferred me to county care, I would die there of complications because a heart poison for 6 months does not recover easily under the care of overworked residents in an underfunded ward. He had timed it perfectly. The toxicology results, he did not know about. He did not know that the private cardiologist Henry had flown in from Massachusetts General the day after our first conversation, had ordered every test, including the one that named his weapon. He also did not know that my grandfather's will had been filed in probate court in Suffolk County 3 weeks ago, which meant that if Daniel succeeded in making me disappear, he would inherit nothing because I had never updated my will after marrying him. Because the Ashford Trust, by its original terms, would revert to a cousin in Connecticut if I died without issue. Daniel had been trying to murder me for money that would never have reached his hands. He was not a mastermind. He was a small, vain, stupid man who had read too many true crime podcasts and thought himself clever. I found all of this out in my first week at the rehabilitation facility, sitting on a white porch swing in a thick wool blanket with a cup of plain hot water in my hands. I could not yet bring myself to drink tea while Henry read from a folder labeled with my husband's name in black permanent marker. When he finished, I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, "Henry, how long would it take to find Vanessa Bryce's professional license, her mortgage information, her bank records, and her social media history going back 3 years?" Henry smiled for the first time since I had met him. "My dear," he said, "I already have them." The weeks that followed were the strangest education of my life. I learned that the Ashford Trust had holdings in 47 public companies, including I laughed out loud when Henry told me a 41% majority stake in Sentinel Coastal Insurance, which was the exact company that had canceled my coverage at Daniel's request. I learned that my grandfather had served on the board of Massachusetts General Hospital for 22 years, which was why a cardiologist had appeared at my bedside within 18 hours of my being identified. I learned that my mother had painted watercolors, just as I did, and that 3 of her paintings hung in the private dining room of the Ashford estate in Back Bay. I learned, mostly, that the small life I had built as Claire Calloway, the rental apartment with a leaky kitchen faucet, the 2009 Subaru with the rust on the rear quarter panel, the third-grade art class I'd taught for 6 years, had not been a small life at all. It had been a life built by a woman who did not know what she had been taken from, and who had loved it anyway. That was not nothing. That was the only part of the old life I decided to keep. I did not call Daniel, not once. I did not text him. I did not respond to the 2 voicemails he left 8 weeks in when presumably some guilt or curiosity finally caught up with him, in which he said he had needed time and wanted to talk about our future. I let him believe, as long as I could, that his wife was somewhere in a county hospital ward fading. I let the silence do its work. In the meantime, I moved, with Henry's help, to Boston. I took possession of the Ashford townhouse. I met my 3 great-aunts, all of whom cried when they saw me and told me I had my grandfather's stubborn chin. I hired a criminal defense attorney, though not for myself, for a strategy you will understand shortly. I began cardiac rehab at a facility overlooking the Charles River. I let my hair grow out to its natural dark auburn, the color it had been before Daniel had once told me, offhandedly, that blondes looked warmer. And I worked, with Henry and with Detective Morales of the Portland Police Department, on the case. Oleandrin is detectable. It is traceable. Detective Morales obtained a warrant for our home in Portland and found, in the back of the garage, a coffee can with dried oleander leaves inside. Oleander does not grow wild in Oregon. Someone had ordered the plant matter online, and someone had paid for it on a credit card, and that credit card, the one Daniel had forgotten he opened in his own name 3 years ago to buy a used motorcycle, told a clear story. The purchases began 7 months before my cardiac event. They continued at 2-week intervals until 8 days before my surgery. Detective Morales also found, on our home laptop, which Daniel had not thought to wipe, a search history that included phrases I will not repeat here, but which any prosecutor would have called a roadmap to intent. Vanessa Bryce, for her part, had been considerably more careful. She had not purchased any oleander, but her text messages to Daniel, which we obtained through a cooperative subpoena after Daniel was arrested and his phone seized, contained enough references to the problem, and when it's done and her family has money we haven't found yet to land her a conspiracy charge all her own. They were arrested on a Thursday morning in April at the condo in Seattle Daniel had purchased with the money from our savings account, using his real name, because he genuinely believed no one was looking for him. I watched the arrest footage later. Daniel looked small in the doorway. He looked confused. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had never once in his life imagined that a woman he had decided to throw away might pick herself up off the floor. The trial was set for October. The charity gala was in September. I want to tell you about the gala because it is the part of this story I have thought about most. Not because it is the most dramatic, although it was dramatic, but because it was the first time since the hospital that I felt, truly, like I had come home to myself. Henry had told me months before that I would need to make my first public appearance as an Ashford soon. The Family Foundation hosted an annual fundraiser at the Boston Public Library for pediatric cardiac research. It had been my grandfather's favorite cause, begun in the year after my mother's death. She had been a pediatric nurse before she had me. The foundation's board had been waiting to meet me. The press had been waiting longer. I agreed to go. I agreed to give the welcome address. And I asked Henry for one favor. Invite Sentinel Coastal Insurance, I said, the executive team, all of them. I want to present the commissioning of the new research wing in their name since they have generously been doing business with my family for many years. Henry did not ask why. He sent the invitations. Sentinel Coastal was, as you may have guessed, the employer of Vanessa Bryce's older sister, Denise Bryce, who was their senior vice president of claims administration. Denise Bryce had personally approved the emergency cancellation of my insurance policy on the day before my surgery. Her signature was on the form. I had obtained a copy of that form 2 months earlier. I stood on the marble steps of the library that September evening in a dark green silk dress my aunt had helped me choose, my chest scar invisible beneath a high neckline, my hair pinned up in the style of the portrait of my mother that hung in the upstairs hall. 400 people filled the room. Henry stood to my left. The board of the foundation stood behind me. I raised my glass, and I thanked every guest by name. Then I thanked Sentinel Coastal specifically. I thanked them for their 43 years of partnership with the Ashford family. I thanked Denise Bryce specifically by name for her role in claims administration. I watched her smile go rigid across the room. I watched the color leave her furor as she began to understand, slowly, that the new majority shareholder of her company was a woman she had personally, in writing, tried to kill. I announced that the Ashford Foundation would be commissioning a new pediatric cardiac wing at Massachusetts General. I announced that and then I announced that, effective immediately, the Ashford Trust would be invoking its shareholder rights to restructure Sentinel Coastal's executive claims division. A press release would be issued in the morning. An independent ethics audit would begin on Monday. Denise Bryce left through a side door before the dessert course. She did not know yet that her sister had been arrested in April. She did not know yet that the evidence against Vanessa would be presented in open court in 3 weeks. She would find out the same way the rest of the world did, and by then the connection between Sentinel Coastal's claims division and a Portland poisoning case would be a story that reporters would chase for the next 6 months. Daniel was convicted in November of attempted murder in the first degree and sentenced to 24 years in the Oregon State Penitentiary. Vanessa Bryce was convicted in January of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 15. Denise Bryce was indicted separately in March for insurance fraud and obstruction in connection with 3 other terminated policies that had conveniently ended in patient death at county facilities over the previous 4 years. That investigation is ongoing. I did not attend Daniel's sentencing. I considered it for a long time. In the end, I sent Henry in my place with a single sheet of paper folded in his jacket pocket, a letter from me that the judge read aloud into the record. I will not share all of it here, but the closing line was this: I was a woman you married for what you thought you could take from her. You took from me my trust, my health, and almost my life. You did not take from me the capacity to build something better without you. That was not yours to take. The morning the letter was read, I stood on the balcony of the Ashford townhouse on Commonwealth Avenue and watched the first snow of the season drift down onto the brownstones below. I was wearing a black cashmere coat. I was holding a cup of coffee, no tea, not yet, maybe not ever again. Henry was waiting downstairs with the car. We were going to Massachusetts General to break ground on the new wing. I thought about the woman I had been 6 weeks before all of this began, the art teacher with the rust-spotted Subaru, the woman who had believed that the warm mug her husband pressed into her hands each night was love. I thought, she was not stupid. She was trusting. There is a difference, and the difference matters. I thought, I will build something for her. I will build a wing of a hospital where women like her, whose hearts have been poisoned slowly by people who claim to love them, will be seen the first time they walk into an emergency room. Their toxicology panels will be run without question. Their bills will not be used as a weapon. Their lives will not depend on whether a wealthy stranger happens to be looking for them. I thought, my mother would have wanted that. I thought, I am 31 years old. I am in Ashford. I am alive. I walked down the stairs, and I got in the car, and I went to work.